"You're just a janitor. Stay out of our way." The security chief's voice echoed through the underground command center as enemy fighter jets screamed overhead, their shadows darkening the windows of Meridian Defense Industries. But Delilah Thorne didn't step back. Instead, she walked calmly toward the classified terminal, her calloused fingers reaching for controls worth $50 million that she wasn't supposed to know existed. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." The alarms had been shrieking for exactly 3 minutes and 47 seconds when the first wave of unidentified aircraft appeared on radar, approaching the restricted airspace above Thornfield Military Research Facility in northern Colorado. What had started as an ordinary Tuesday morning had transformed into a national security crisis that would expose secrets buried for over a decade. Delilah Thorne, 42 years old, had been invisible for so long that most employees at Meridian Defense Industries forgot she existed entirely. With graying auburn hair always pulled into a practical bun and wearing the same faded blue uniform every day, she moved through the sprawling defense contractor facility like a ghost. Her weathered hands had cleaned every surface, emptied every wastebasket, and mopped every floor in the complex for the past 8 years. Security guards nodded absently when she passed. Engineers stepped around her without acknowledgement. Executives discussed classified projects in her presence, as if she were furniture. The morning had begun like every other. Delilah arrived at Meridian Defense Industries at 4:30 a.m., exactly 30 minutes before her official shift started. She preferred the quiet hours when the hallways were empty and she could work without interruption. Her routine was methodical and precise. Start with the executive offices on the 5th and 10th floor. Work her way down through the engineering departments. Finish in the underground research laboratories where the most sensitive projects were developed. She had been cleaning the windows in conference room Delta 7 when the first explosions lit up the horizon. Through the reinforced glass, she watched as military helicopters scattered like startled birds from the nearby airfield. The facility's defensive systems activated automatically, blast shields sliding down over critical windows while emergency lighting bathed everything in an ominous red glow. Most of the staff had evacuated to designated safe zones, following protocols drilled into them monthly. But Delilah had remained in the building, continuing her work with the same steady determination that characterized everything she did. She had seen crises before, though none quite like this. Her hands kept moving, dusting surfaces and organizing supplies even as the building shook from nearby impacts. The underground command center became the facility's nerve center during the emergency. Defense contractors, military liaisons, and government officials crowded around banks of monitors showing radar displays, satellite feeds, and communication channels. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of fear. Everyone was talking at once, voices overlapping in controlled panic as they tried to coordinate responses to the unprecedented attack. Security Chief Raymond Castillo paced behind the main console, his face flushed with stress and authority. He had been with Meridian for 15 years, working his way up through the ranks by following protocols and never questioning orders. Today, those protocols were failing. The enemy aircraft were using technology that made them nearly invisible to conventional radar. Their weapon systems were more advanced than anything in the intelligence reports. Worst of all, they seemed to know exactly which buildings contained the most valuable research. "Where's our air support?" demanded Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the facility's chief research director. Her voice carried the sharp edge of someone accustomed to having her questions answered immediately. "The Air Force Base is only 20 minutes away." Castillo wiped sweat from his forehead as he studied the communications board. "All military aircraft in the region have been grounded by some kind of electronic interference. The enemy is using jamming technology we've never seen before." It was at that moment that Delilah entered the command center, pushing her cleaning cart ahead of her with the same unhurried pace she maintained throughout every workday. She had come to empty the wastebaskets and wipe down the surfaces, just as she did every Tuesday at 11:15 a.m. The fact that the facility was under attack didn't change her schedule. What is she doing here? Dr. Hendricks snapped, pointing at Delilah with barely concealed irritation. This is a restricted area during emergencies. Castillo looked up from his instruments, noticing Delilah for what might have been the first time in months. Ma'am, you need to evacuate immediately. Report to Safe Zone C with the other non-essential personnel. But Delilah wasn't looking at Castillo or Dr. Hendricks. Her eyes were fixed on the main display screen, where tactical information scrolled past in green text against a black background. Her expression had changed subtly, the vacant compliance of a service worker replaced by something sharper, more focused. She was reading the data with the intensity of someone who understood exactly what it meant. The jamming frequency, she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the alarms and shouting. It's centered at 2.4 gigahertz with harmonic interference patterns. The command center fell silent for a moment. Everyone turned to stare at the janitor who had just demonstrated knowledge that most of them didn't possess. Dr. Hendricks recovered first, her voice dripping with condescension. I'm sorry, did our cleaning lady just try to explain military communications jamming? Castillo stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward his sidearm. Ma'am, you need to leave this area immediately. You don't have clearance to be here during a security event. But Delilah was already moving toward the classified terminal that controlled the facility's most advanced defensive systems. Her cleaning cart forgotten, she walked with purpose that seemed completely at odds with her humble appearance. The transformation was so sudden and complete that several technicians actually stepped back, unconsciously making room for her. Stop right there, Castillo shouted, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. You're just a janitor. Stay out of our way. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Delilah paused at the terminal, her weathered fingers hovering over controls that were worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime. Outside, the enemy aircraft were regrouping for another attack run. Inside the command center, highly trained professionals were failing to mount any effective defense. And in that moment, standing between her old life and secrets she had buried for over a decade, Delilah Thorne made a choice that would change everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Delilah Thorne had perfected the art of invisibility long before she ever stepped foot inside Meridian Defense Industries. At 42, she possessed the remarkable ability to move through spaces without disturbing the air around her, to complete tasks without drawing attention, to exist in plain sight while remaining completely unnoticed. Her colleagues had nicknamed her the Ghost, not out of affection, but because they genuinely forgot she was there most of the time. Every morning at 4:30 a.m. sharp, Delilah's beat-up Honda Civic pulled into the employee parking lot of Meridian Defense Industries. The car was 15 years old, painted a faded silver that matched her unremarkable appearance perfectly. She parked in the same spot every day, space 247, far from the building entrance where executives and engineers claimed the premium locations. The walk across the asphalt gave her time to prepare mentally for another day of systematic invisibility. Her uniform told the story she wanted everyone to believe. A simple blue jumpsuit with maintenance services embroidered in white thread across the chest pocket. The fabric had been washed so many times it felt soft as cotton, and small stains that never quite came out served as evidence of 8 years spent cleaning up after other people. Her work boots were practical steel-toed affairs, scuffed and worn but still solid. Everything about her appearance suggested someone who had never aspired to anything beyond honest manual labor. The Meridian facility sprawled across 47 acres in the Colorado foothills, a complex of glass and steel buildings connected by underground tunnels and sky bridges. Most employees use the main entrance with its impressive lobby and security checkpoints, staffed by guards in crisp uniforms. Delilah entered through the service door near the loading dock, scanning her employee badge against a reader that recorded her arrival time with mechanical precision. Her supervisor, Frank Kowalski, rarely bothered to check on her work anymore. After 8 years, he trusted Delilah to complete her assignments without oversight. "She's reliable," he would tell anyone who asked, which wasn't often. "Shows up on time, doesn't cause trouble, gets the job done." What more can you want from maintenance staff? The morning routine never varied. Delilah retrieved her cleaning supplies from the storage closet on the ground floor: industrial vacuum cleaner, microfiber cloths, glass cleaner, disinfectant, trash bags, and a cart that squeaked slightly on its left front wheel. She had requested a replacement cart multiple times over the years, but facilities management always found more pressing priorities for their budget. Her first stop was always the executive offices on the 10th floor. These spaces required delicate handling, expensive furniture that couldn't be damaged, important documents that couldn't be disturbed, and executives who preferred not to be reminded that their offices required cleaning at all. Delilah had learned to time her work perfectly, arriving after the night security sweep, but before the earliest executives appeared for their power. Breakfasts and strategy meetings. She moved through CEO Patricia Rothschild's office with practiced efficiency, dusting the mahogany desk without touching the carefully arranged papers, emptying the wastebasket that rarely contained anything more sensitive than coffee grounds and protein bar wrappers, and wiping down the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular views of the Rocky Mountains. Rothschild had spoken to her exactly 3 times in 8 years, each interaction consisting of a polite nod and a mumbled thank you that suggested the CEO wasn't entirely sure who she was talking to. The engineering floors presented different challenges. These spaces buzzed with activity, even during early morning hours, as project teams worked around the clock to meet government contract deadlines. Computer workstations covered every available surface, their multiple monitors displaying technical diagrams, code sequences, and classified documents that Delilah was specifically instructed never to look at directly. Just clean around the equipment, her training manual had specified. Maintenance personnel are not authorized to view project materials under any circumstances, but it was impossible to clean a space without observing it. Over 8 years, Delilah had developed an unconscious familiarity with the rhythms of Meridian's research and development efforts. She knew which projects were succeeding by the energy in the rooms where teams worked on them. She could identify struggling initiatives by the stressed conversations and empty coffee cups that accumulated faster than usual. The engineers treated her exactly as she expected them to, as part of the building's infrastructure, no more significant than the heating system or fluorescent lighting. They discussed classified projects in her presence without lowering their voices, debated technical problems while she emptied their trash bins, and shared confidential information as if she were deaf as well as invisible. The new radar countermeasures aren't working properly, she had overheard Dr. James Morrison telling his team leader just last week. The frequency modulation is too predictable. Any sophisticated enemy system could adapt within minutes. Dr. Morrison was Meridian's leading expert on electronic warfare systems, a man whose security clearance was so high that his office required special procedures for cleaning. Delilah was required to work in his space only when he was present, and 2 security guards had to observe her every movement. Yet Morrison discussed his most sensitive research as if she weren't standing 3 feet away, wiping down his whiteboard covered in equations that supposedly represented. The morning routine never varied. Delilah retrieved her cleaning supplies from the storage closet on the ground floor: industrial vacuum cleaner, microfiber cloths, glass cleaner, disinfectant, trash bags, and a cart that squeaked slightly on its left front wheel. She had requested a replacement cart multiple times over the years, but facilities management always found more pressing priorities for their budget. Her first stop was always the executive offices on the 10th floor. These spaces required delicate handling, expensive furniture that couldn't be damaged, important documents that couldn't be disturbed, and executives who preferred not to be reminded that their offices required cleaning at all. Delilah had learned to time her work perfectly, arriving after the night security sweep, but before the earliest executives appeared for their power. Breakfasts and strategy meetings. She moved through CEO Patricia Rothschild's office with practiced efficiency, dusting the mahogany desk without touching the carefully arranged papers, emptying the wastebasket that rarely contained anything more sensitive than coffee grounds and protein bar wrappers, and wiping down the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered spectacular views of the Rocky Mountains. Rothschild had spoken to her exactly 3 times in 8 years, each interaction consisting of a polite nod and a mumbled thank you that suggested the CEO wasn't entirely sure who she was talking to. The engineering floors presented different challenges. These spaces buzzed with activity, even during early morning hours, as project teams worked around the clock to meet government contract deadlines. Computer workstations covered every available surface, their multiple monitors displaying technical diagrams, code sequences, and classified documents that Delilah was specifically instructed never to look at directly. Just clean around the equipment, her training manual had specified. Maintenance personnel are not authorized to view project materials under any circumstances, but it was impossible to clean a space without observing it. Over 8 years, Delilah had developed an unconscious familiarity with the rhythms of Meridian's research and development efforts. She knew which projects were succeeding by the energy in the rooms where teams worked on them. She could identify struggling initiatives by the stressed conversations and empty coffee cups that accumulated faster than usual. The engineers treated her exactly as she expected them to, as part of the building's infrastructure, no more significant than the heating system or fluorescent lighting. They discussed classified projects in her presence without lowering their voices, debated technical problems while she emptied their trash bins, and shared confidential information as if she were deaf as well as invisible. The new radar countermeasures aren't working properly, she had overheard Dr. James Morrison telling his team leader just last week. The frequency modulation is too predictable. Any sophisticated enemy system could adapt within minutes. Dr. Morrison was Meridian's leading expert on electronic warfare systems, a man whose security clearance was so high that his office required special procedures for cleaning. Delilah was required to work in his space only when he was present, and 2 security guards had to observe her every movement. Yet Morrison discussed his most sensitive research as if she weren't standing 3 feet away, wiping down his whiteboard covered in equations that supposedly represented millions of dollars in defense spending. The underground research laboratories were Delilah's final stop each day, and her least favorite. These spaces felt different from the rest of the facility, more serious, more secretive, more heavily guarded. Her cleaning cart had to pass through 3 separate security checkpoints to reach level B7, where Meridian's most classified projects were developed behind reinforced steel doors. Advanced weapons research. Read the sign outside Laboratory 14. Though everyone referred to it simply as the vault, Delilah cleaned this space twice per week, always under the watchful eyes of Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the facility's chief research director. Hendricks was a woman who radiated authority and impatience, someone accustomed to having her instructions followed without question or delay. Don't touch anything except surfaces specifically designated for cleaning, Hendricks would remind Delilah each time, as if she hadn't been following the same procedures for years. Don't look at any display screens. Don't ask questions about anything you might observe. The laboratory contained equipment that hummed with barely contained energy, computers that never seemed to sleep, and prototype devices covered by canvas tarps when maintenance personnel were present. The air itself felt different down there, charged with electricity and possibility and secrets that could reshape the balance of global power. Delilah's colleagues in the maintenance department often complained about the laboratory assignments. "Creepy place," Frank would mutter. "All those scientists staring at you like you might steal their precious secrets." As if any of us would know what to do with that stuff anyway, but Delilah never complained. She cleaned Laboratory 14 with the same methodical precision she brought to every task, wiping down surfaces and emptying wastebaskets, while maintaining the blank expression of someone whose thoughts never ventured beyond the immediate requirements of her job. She had perfected this performance over 8 years, becoming so convincing that she sometimes almost believed it herself. Her workday ended at 1 p.m. when the day shift maintenance crew arrived to handle afternoon cleaning duties. Delilah would return her supplies to the storage closet, punch out on the time clock, and drive home to her small apartment in Millbrook, a working-class neighborhood 20 minutes from the facility. Her neighbors knew her as a quiet woman who kept to herself, paid her rent on time, and never caused problems for anyone. In the evenings, Delilah read romance novels and watched cooking shows on her 12-inch television. She shopped for groceries at the discount supermarket, where cashiers who had been ringing up her purchases. The aircraft moved with unnatural silence, their engines producing no visible exhaust or heat signatures. They shifted positions within their formation without appearing to bank or turn, as if they were sliding through three-dimensional space rather than flying through it. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to be partially transparent, flickering in and out of visual clarity like mirages. On the 7th floor, Dr. Patricia Hendricks was leading an emergency meeting of department heads when the building's radar systems detected the incoming threat. The conference room's main display screen showed tactical information streaming in from various sensors positioned around the facility's perimeter. What they saw defied conventional understanding of aerial warfare. "The radar cross-section keeps changing," reported Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Matthews, Meridian's military liaison officer. "One moment they show up as large as cargo planes, the next they're practically invisible. It's like they're using some kind of adaptive camouflage technology." Dr. Hendricks studied the display with growing concern. As Meridian's chief research director, she understood the implications better than most. "What about our communication systems? Can we reach the Air Force Base?" Matthews shook her head grimly. "All radio frequencies are being jammed. Satellite communications are down. Even our hardened military channels are experiencing interference patterns I've never seen before." Security Chief Raymond Castillo burst into the conference room, his face flushed with exertion and barely controlled panic. "We've lost contact with the perimeter guard posts. Something is interfering with all our electronic systems. Even the backup generators are showing power fluctuations." The third explosion was close enough to shake dust from the ceiling tiles. This time, the building's structural monitoring systems detected actual damage, minor stress fractures in the east, wing support columns, and shattered windows on the lower floors facing the direction of the attack. Throughout the facility, employees were following evacuation procedures with increasing urgency. Scientists grabbed laptop computers and external hard drives containing irreplaceable research data. Engineers secured prototype equipment behind reinforced vault doors. Administrative staff activated document destruction protocols, feeding classified papers into industrial shredders that would reduce them to confetti-sized particles. But the evacuation was proceeding too slowly. Meridian Defense Industries employed over 800 people across 3 shifts, and the building's exit routes were designed for orderly evacuation during fire emergencies, not hostile military action. Bottlenecks formed at security checkpoints where guards were required to verify that no classified materials were leaving the building without proper authorization. In the underground levels, automated systems were sealing the most sensitive research areas behind blast doors that could withstand direct nuclear strikes. Laboratory 14, where Delilah cleaned twice weekly under Dr. Hendrick's watchful supervision, disappeared behind 6 feet of reinforced steel and concrete as defensive protocols activated. Facilities' computer networks began experiencing systematic attacks that were far more sophisticated than conventional cyber warfare. Rather than attempting to steal data or plant malicious software, the intruders seemed focused on disrupting defensive capabilities and communication systems. Firewalls that had been designed to resist nation-state level attacks were being bypassed as if they didn't exist. This isn't random terrorism, Dr. Hendricks announced to the emergency response team that had assembled in the fortified command center beneath the main building. These attackers know exactly what we do here. They're targeting our specific capabilities with surgical precision. The 4th explosion was different from the others, not the sharp crack of high explosives, but a deep, resonant boom that seemed to come from directly overhead. The building's advanced radar systems, which had been tracking the approaching aircraft with increasing difficulty, suddenly went completely offline. Backup sensors showed nothing but electronic static where the threat had been moments before. Emergency communications with local law enforcement and military installations revealed the scope of the crisis. Similar attacks were occurring simultaneously at defense contractor facilities across the western United States. Northrop Grumman's facility in Utah was under assault by identical aircraft using the same advanced jamming technology. Lockheed Martin's research center in Nevada was reporting electromagnetic pulses that had disabled their entire computer network. It's coordinated, Lieutenant Colonel Matthews reported, her voice tight with professional concern. Someone has intimate knowledge of our defense industry's most sensitive installations, and they have technology that's at least a generation ahead of our current capabilities. The facility's senior staff gathered in the underground command center, watching helplessly as their most sophisticated defensive systems proved inadequate against an enemy they couldn't even identify properly. Radar displays showed ghost images that appeared and disappeared without pattern. Communication channels filled with electronic noise that followed no known jamming protocols. Outside, the enemy aircraft had taken position surrounding the facility, maintaining perfect formation while remaining nearly invisible to conventional detection methods. They weren't bombing the building into rubble or attempting to breach the perimeter defenses. Instead, they seemed to be waiting for something or someone. Why aren't they attacking? Dr. Hendricks asked, studying the tactical displays with growing confusion. They have overwhelming technological superiority. They could level this entire facility in minutes. Security Chief Castillo wiped sweat from his forehead as he monitored communications channels that carried nothing but static. Maybe they want something other than destruction. Maybe they're here to steal rather than destroy. The implications were chilling. Meridian Defense Industries housed research projects worth billions of dollars, technologies that could shift the balance of global military power if they fell into the wrong hands. Advanced radar systems, next-generation electronic warfare capabilities, and experimental weapons platforms that existed nowhere else on Earth. As if responding to their conversation, the facility's main computer network experienced another wave of sophisticated intrusion attempts. This time, the attackers weren't trying to disable systems. They were probing for specific information, following digital pathways that led directly to the most classified research projects. They're looking for something specific, Dr. Hendricks realized, her face pale as she watched security logs scroll past on the monitoring screens. This isn't a random attack or even industrial espionage. They know exactly what we have here, and they know where to find it. The crisis had escalated beyond anything their emergency protocols were designed to handle. Military aircraft that defied conventional physics were holding their facility hostage while conducting surgical strikes on America's most advanced defense research capabilities. Communication with outside help was impossible. Their most sophisticated weapons systems were proving useless against technology that seemed decades ahead of current military capabilities. In the maintenance storage closet on the first floor, Delilah Thorne finished securing her cleaning supplies and began walking toward the command center. She had maintained her routine for as long as possible, but the situation was deteriorating too rapidly for normal procedures. Something had to be done, and the facility's leadership was clearly unprepared for threats that exceeded their understanding of current technology. The time for invisibility was ending. Whether she was ready or not, the command center had descended into controlled chaos when Delilah pushed her squeaky cleaning cart through the reinforced steel doors. 23 of Meridian's most senior personnel crowded around banks of monitors, their voices overlapping in urgent conversations about threats they couldn't understand and defenses that weren't working. The air reeked of stress sweat and burnt electronics from overloaded systems trying desperately to maintain functionality. "Ma'am, you can't be in here." Security Chief Castillo spotted Delilah immediately, his hand instinctively moving toward his sidearm. "This is a restricted area during Code Yellow alerts." But Delilah wasn't looking at Castillo. Her eyes were fixed on the main tactical display, where streams of data painted a picture that everyone else was misinterpreting. The enemy aircraft weren't randomly jamming communications. They were using a synchronized frequency hopping pattern that created predictable gaps in their electronic warfare coverage. The radar ghosts weren't equipment malfunctions. They were deliberate deception signatures, designed to mask the true number and positions of attacking aircraft. "Jamming isn't complete," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the alarms and shouting. "There's a 17-second window every 4 minutes when their pattern resets." Dr. Patricia Hendricks whirled around, her face flushed with indignation. "Excuse me? Did our janitor just attempt to analyze military electronic warfare tactics?" Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Matthews looked up from her communications console, where she had been trying unsuccessfully to reach any outside military installation. "Ma'am, please evacuate to Safe Zone C immediately. Non-essential personnel are required to." "The frequency modulation follows a Fibonacci sequence," Delilah continued, ignoring the interruptions as she studied the scrolling data. "Centered at 2.4 gigahertz, with harmonic interference at 7.2 and 14.4. They're using quantum encrypted burst transmission to coordinate their jamming pattern." The command center fell silent except for the persistent wail of emergency alarms. Every person in the room turned to stare at the middle-aged woman in a faded blue jumpsuit who had just demonstrated knowledge that most defense contractors didn't possess. Castillo stepped forward, his voice sharp with authority and confusion. "Lady, I don't know what game you think you're playing, but this is a national security crisis. You need to leave this area immediately." But Delilah was already moving toward the quantum communications console, a piece of equipment so classified that only 3 people in the facility were authorized to operate it. Dr. Hendricks moved to block her path, her voice rising with each word. "Absolutely not. That system requires level 7 clearance and specialized training. Your maintenance staff. The quantum entanglement array is configured incorrectly for burst transmission," Delilah said, her hands hovering over controls worth more than $50 million. "The phase variance needs to be adjusted to account for atmospheric interference at current altitude and humidity levels." Double quotes Dr. Marcus Webb, Meridian's senior physicist, pushed forward from the back of the group. He had helped design the quantum communication system and understood its capabilities better than anyone else in the room. That's actually correct. But how could you possibly know about phase variance calculations?" Delilah's fingers were already moving across the touchscreen interface, navigating through security menus that should have been impossible for her to access. But her employee badge, the same one she had used for 8 years to enter service areas and clean restricted laboratories, was somehow providing her with administrative privileges that exceeded even Dr. Hendricks' clearance level. "Wait a minute," Dr. Webb said, squinting at his security monitor. "Her access codes. They're not maintenance level. They're showing as ... double quotes." He paused, his face going pale. "They're showing as level Omega clearance." Level Omega clearance was a classification so high that most people in the room had never heard of it. It existed only in theoretical discussions about hypothetical projects that might require access to the most sensitive military technologies. There were fewer than 20 people in the entire United States government who possessed such authorization. "That's impossible," Dr. Hendricks snapped. "Run a system diagnostic. There's obviously a malfunction in the security database." But Delilah was no longer the invisible janitor they thought they knew. Her posture had changed, her movements becoming precise and purposeful in ways that spoke of training far beyond custodial duties. She worked the quantum communication controls with the fluid confidence of someone who had operated similar equipment countless times before. "Quantum phase alignment complete," she announced, her voice taking on the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Establishing encrypted channel to NORAD Cheyenne Mountain Complex." The main communication screen flickered, static patterns resolving into a clear signal for the first time since the attack began. A military voice crackled through speakers that had been silent for over an hour. "This is NORAD Command. We have been trying to reach Meridian Defense Industries for 73 minutes. Please confirm facility status and identify yourself." Delilah keyed the microphone, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding her. "NORAD Command, this is Meridian Defense Industries. Facility is under coordinated attack by unknown aircraft using advanced stealth and electronic warfare capabilities. Request immediate air support and tactical assessment. Copy, Meridian. Air support is being scrambled from 3 bases. ETA 12 minutes. Please identify the individual speaking." "We don't recognize the voice signature." For a moment, Delilah hesitated. The people around her were staring with expressions ranging from confusion to outright shock. Security Chief Castillo had his hand on his weapon, but seemed uncertain whether she represented a threat or a solution. Dr. Hendricks was frantically typing on her tablet, trying to access personnel records that might explain what they were witnessing. "Request verification of authority to coordinate defense response." NORAD's voice continued. "Please provide proper authentication codes." Delilah closed her eyes briefly, as if making a decision she had hoped never to face. When she opened them again, the transformation was complete. The invisible janitor had been replaced by someone who radiated command, authority, and technical expertise. "Authentication code Whisper 77 Alpha Delta," she said clearly. "Project designation Shadowvo. Operational status ... reactivated." The silence from NORAD lasted exactly 15 seconds. When the response came, the military operator's voice carried a tone of unmistakable respect and recognition. "Code verified. Welcome back, Shadowvo. We have F-22 Raptors and B-2 Spirits moving to your location. What are your tactical requirements?" Dr. Webb was staring at his security monitor in disbelief. Her clearance level just changed again. "It's showing classifications I've never seen before. And there's a flag in her file that requires ... Wait." He looked up at Delilah with growing amazement. "It requires notification of the Joint Chiefs of Staff if her status ever becomes active." "That's ridiculous," Dr. Hendricks protested, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. "She's worked here for 8 years as a janitor. I've supervised her personally in the classified laboratories." Lieutenant Colonel Matthews had been studying her classified personnel database with growing confusion. According to military records, employee Delilah Thorne has a background check that shows only civilian employment history. But these authentication codes, they're tied to operations that don't exist in any database I can access. Castillo lowered his weapon but kept his hand ready. "Ma'am, I need you to explain how you have access to communication systems and clearance levels that our senior staff can't use. Delilah turned from the communication console, her expression calm but distant. For 8 years, she had been the invisible woman who cleaned their offices and laboratories without being noticed. Now they were seeing her for the first time, and the reality was far different from anything they had imagined. Enemy aircraft are using technology based on research that was stolen from this facility 6 months ago, she said, her voice carrying the weight of classified knowledge. They know our defensive capabilities because they have access to the same development data. Traditional countermeasures won't work because they were designed to defeat the systems they're using against us. How could you possibly know that? Dr. Hendricks demanded. Delilah looked at the woman who had supervised her cleaning duties for years without ever truly seeing her. Because I designed the countermeasures they're using. And I designed the systems needed to defeat them. The implication hit everyone in the room simultaneously. The quiet woman they had ignored for 8 years wasn't just a janitor with hidden knowledge. She was the architect of technologies they were only beginning to understand, and possibly the only person who could save them from an enemy that was using her own innovations against them. Outside, the enemy aircraft maintained their positions, waiting with mechanical patience for whatever they had come to obtain. But inside the command center, the balance of power had shifted in ways that none of them could have anticipated. The invisible woman had finally been seen, and nothing would ever be the same. The quantum communication array hummed with power as Delilah's fingers danced across controls that had never responded to anyone else with such fluid precision. Data streams flowed across multiple monitors, showing tactical information that painted a picture of coordinated attacks across 7 defense facilities simultaneously. But it was the next transmission from NORAD that would shatter every assumption the Meridian staff had made about their invisible janitor, Shadowvo. This is General Patricia Morrison, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The voice crackled through the secured channel with unmistakable authority. Confirm your operational status and current situation assessment. Every person in the command center froze. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't personally communicate with janitors or even most facility commanders. This was a woman who briefed the president on matters of national security, someone whose voice was heard only during the gravest military crises. Delilah keyed the microphone without hesitation. General Morrison, this is Shadowvo. Operational status is active as of 11 minutes ago. Enemy forces are using modified versions of Project Ghostwire technology combined with adaptive radar, countermeasures derived from the Phantom Shield program. They have detailed knowledge of our defensive capabilities and are systematically neutralizing them. Dr. Hendricks grabbed Lieutenant Colonel Matthews by the arm, her voice barely a whisper. Ghostwire and Phantom Shield. Those are black projects. How could she possibly know those designations? Matthews was staring at her classified terminal in shock. Those project names aren't even in my database. They're beyond my clearance level. General Morrison's response carried the weight of history and recognition. Copy that, Shadowvo. We have F-22 Raptors 3 minutes out, but our pilots are reporting the same electronic interference you experienced. Can you provide tactical guidance for engagement? Negative on direct engagement, General. Enemy aircraft are using quantum phase stealth that makes them effectively invisible to conventional targeting systems. However, their power requirements create thermal signatures that appear every 97 seconds during cooling cycles. Recommend thermal imaging at 3.7 to 4.1 micrometers during the predicted phase shift windows. The communication channel went silent for nearly 30 seconds. When General Morrison spoke again, her voice carried a tone that everyone in the room recognized as profound relief, mixed with something approaching awe, confirmed Shadowvo. Thermal imaging protocols are being transmitted to all aircraft. It's good to have you back. That single phrase, it's good to have you back, from the most senior, military officer in the United States, spoken to someone they had believed was a janitor, hit the command center like a physical blow. Dr. Webb nearly dropped his tablet. Security Chief Castillo's hand fell away from his weapon entirely. Dr. Hendricks sank into a chair, her face pale with the realization that nothing she thought she knew about her facility was accurate, but the revelation was far from over. The main tactical display suddenly shifted as Delilah interfaced directly with systems that weren't supposed to be accessible to anyone below the facility director level. Classified information began appearing on screens throughout the command center, satellite feeds showing enemy positions, real-time analysis of their technology, and tactical assessments that revealed the scope of the coordinated attack. How is she accessing these systems? Dr. Webb whispered, watching as data streams appeared faster than their most advanced computers could process. These aren't even connected to our local network. Delilah's response came without her looking away from the displays. Quantum entanglement communication links to 17 different military satellites, each carrying processing capabilities that exceed this entire facility's computing power. The infrastructure was installed 8 years ago as part of a deep cover operation. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews felt the blood drain from her face. Deep cover operation? You mean ... This facility has been under continuous covert protection for 8 years. Delilah confirmed, her fingers never pausing in their work across multiple control interfaces. Project Shadowvo required embedding advanced defensive capabilities within the existing Meridian infrastructure without the knowledge of regular personnel. The implication was staggering. For 8 years, while they thought they were simply conducting defense research under normal security protocols, their facility had been operating under the protection of one of the military's most classified programs. The quiet janitor they had ignored had actually been their guardian, monitoring threats and maintaining systems they never knew existed. Quantum communication array you've been using for routine contract discussions, Delilah continued, has secondary capabilities that can coordinate with military satellites in real time. The emergency lighting system includes adaptive camouflage projectors. Even the fire suppression system has been modified to deploy countermeasures against electronic warfare attacks. Dr. Hendricks found her voice, though it came out as barely more than a croak. You've been watching us. For 8 years, you've been watching everything we do. Not watching, protecting. Delilah's tone carried no defensiveness, only matter-of-fact explanation. The research conducted at this facility represents technological advances that could shift global military balance. Multiple foreign intelligence services and terrorist organizations have attempted infiltration over the past 8 years. None succeeded because they were neutralized before reaching their objectives. Security Chief Castillo thought about every security briefing he had conducted, every threat assessment he had filed, every time he had assured the staff that their facility was secure. The break-in attempts, the ones that always seemed to fail for no apparent reason. 17 separate infiltration attempts, Delilah confirmed. Each one was allowed to proceed far enough to identify the full network of operatives, then neutralized through methods that appeared to be coincidental. Equipment failures or accidental discoveries by security personnel. The external speakers crackled with an update from the approaching fighter aircraft. An ORAD command, this is Falcon Leader. We have visual on enemy aircraft using thermal imaging. Holy ... There are 12 of them, not 6. They were masking their true numbers, confirmed Falcon Leader. Shadowvo predicted thermal masking protocols. Continue engagement as directed. Dr. Webb was scrolling through security logs on his tablet, his expression growing more amazed with each entry he discovered. These system modifications, they're integrated into everything. Our entire facility has been essentially a military installation disguised as a civilian research center. The disguise was necessary, Delilah explained, simultaneously coordinating with the approaching fighters and monitoring enemy positions. Overt military protection would have attracted attention from hostile forces. Hidden protection allowed normal research to continue while maintaining security against advanced threats. The sound of approaching jet engines became audible even through the facility's reinforced walls. On the tactical displays, F-22 Raptors appeared as friendly contacts moving toward engagement positions. But the enemy aircraft were already responding to the new threat, their formations shifting into attack configurations that revealed capabilities beyond conventional military technology. Falcon Leader. Be advised that enemy aircraft possess adaptive learning capabilities. They will modify their tactics based on your approach patterns. Recommend quantum encrypted communication protocols to prevent interception of your coordination signals. Copy that. Shadowvo. Switching to quantum channels now, Lieutenant. Colonel Matthews was studying classified databases that her security clearance had never allowed her to access before. These files. Project Shadowvo was initiated after intelligence indicated that multiple hostile nations had developed technology capable of neutralizing CONVENTIONL defenses. You're not just protecting this facility. You're field testing countermeasures for threats that haven't been made public. The technology these aircraft are using, Delilah said. Her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she was revealing, represents a combination of stolen American research and foreign innovations that our intelligence services identified 3 years ago. Today's attack is a field test of their capabilities against our latest countermeasures. You mean this whole attack ... Hendricks began is exactly what we've been preparing for since Project Shadowvo was implemented. Delilah's hands never stopped moving across the control interfaces. The difference is that they believe they're attacking a conventional research facility with standard security measures. They have no idea they're facing technology that was specifically designed to defeat their capabilities. The first missile launch appeared on the tactical displays as the F-22s engaged the enemy aircraft. But instead of conventional explosive warheads, the weapons carried payloads that generated electromagnetic pulses calibrated to disrupt the quantum phase stealth systems, protecting the hostile aircraft. One by one, the enemy aircraft began appearing clearly on radar as their advanced camouflage failed. The mysterious flickering shapes that had seemed almost supernatural suddenly became visible as conventional, though highly advanced, military aircraft. Falcon Leader to NORAD Command. Enemy stealth has been neutralized. We have clear targeting solutions on all hostile aircraft. Authorized to engage, General Morrison's voice commanded. Shadowvo, recommend engagement priorities. Delilah studied the tactical display, where 12 enemy aircraft were now fully visible and attempting to retreat from an engagement they had expected to dominate. Priority targets are aircraft designated Echo 7 and Echo 11. Those are carrying the quantum processing units that coordinate the entire attack formation. Neutralize those first, and the remaining aircraft will lose coordination capabilities. The revelation was complete. The woman they had dismissed as an invisible janitor was actually the architect and operator of one of the most sophisticated defense systems ever deployed. She had spent 8 years hiding in plain sight, protecting them from threats they never knew existed, using technology that redefined the possibilities of covert military operations. And now, with enemy aircraft falling from the sky under the guidance of her tactical expertise, everyone in the command center finally understood who had been watching over them all along. In the stunned silence that followed Delilah's tactical coordination with the fighter jets, Dr. Marcus Webb frantically accessed classified databases that his security clearance had never touched before. His hands trembled as restricted files opened on his screen, revealing information that explained everything and nothing about the woman who had been emptying his wastebasket for 8 years. Project Shadowvo, he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. Initiated September 15, 2017. Following intelligence reports of advanced foreign technology capable of penetrating conventional military defenses. Primary operative, Dr. Delilah Thorne, former Director of Advanced Weapons Research at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. Dr. Hendricks nearly fell out of her chair. Director of Advanced Weapons Research? She was a department head at one of the most classified facilities in the country. The file continued to reveal impossible details. Lieutenant Colonel Matthews leaned over Webb's shoulder, reading classifications that exceeded her own clearance level. Ph.D. in quantum physics from MIT at age 24. Ph.D. in advanced materials engineering from Stanford at 26. Lead developer of 17 different weapon systems currently in active military service. That's impossible, Security Chief Castillo muttered, watching as more details appeared on the screen. I ran background checks on every maintenance employee. She showed up as a high school graduate with 8 years of custodial experience. Webb's finger traced down the document as he found the answer. Cover identity was constructed using classified Department of Defense protocols. All public records were replaced with fabricated history to support deep cover assignment. Subject agreed to indefinite civilian identity maintenance. Following. His voice trailed off as he reached a section that made everyone in the command center fall silent. Following. The loss of her entire research team in the Blackwater Canyon incident. Classified as a catastrophic failure of experimental quantum weapons. Technology that resulted in 14 fatalities and the complete destruction of Laboratory Complex 7 at Lawrence Livermore. The tactical displays continued showing the aerial battle overhead, but nobody was watching the screens anymore. They were staring at Delilah, who stood motionless at the quantum communication console, her face a mask of controlled grief that she had been hiding for nearly a decade. Survivor guilt, Dr. Hendricks said quietly, her earlier hostility replaced by dawning comprehension. She blamed herself for whatever happened to her team. Dr. Webb continued reading from the classified file, his voice growing softer as the human cost of Project Shadowfall became clear. Subject requested immediate discharge from all research activities, following psychological evaluation indicating severe trauma response. Request denied due to critical nature of subject's knowledge regarding quantum-based weapon systems. Alternative assignment approved. Deep cover protection of civilian research facilities, likely to be targeted by hostile forces, seeking similar technology. She didn't choose this, Lieutenant Colonel Matthews realized. She was assigned here. Ordered to hide who she really was. The file contained psychological evaluations that painted a picture of brilliant scientist destroyed by the consequences of her own innovations. Subject exhibits classic symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder related to responsibility for technological disaster. Recommended treatment includes structured isolation from research activities while maintaining operational readiness for defense scenarios. Jesus Christ, Castillo breathed. They turned her into a janitor as therapy. Made her invisible so she could heal from watching her friends die. But there was more to the story. And Webb found it in supplementary files that required even higher clearance levels. The Blackwater Canyon incident wasn't an accident. Foreign agents had infiltrated the Lawrence Livermore facility and sabotaged the quantum weapons test. Dr. Thorne's team died because enemy operatives deliberately caused a containment failure. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Delilah hadn't just lost her colleagues to a tragic accident. She had watched them die because of foreign interference with her work. The guilt she carried wasn't just survivor's remorse. It was the knowledge that her innovations had been turned against the people she cared about most. The technology those aircraft are using today, Dr. Hendricks said, pieces falling into place in her mind. It's based on the same research that killed her team. Webb nodded, reading from intelligence assessments that connected current events to historical tragedy. Foreign operatives who conducted the Blackwater Canyon sabotage have been developing weaponized quantum technology for 8 years. Today's attack represents the first operational deployment of systems derived from stolen American research. So she's been preparing for this specific scenario, Matthews concluded. Not just protecting us from random threats. She knew they would eventually come here using this same technology that killed her friends. The personal cost of Delilah's assignment became clearer as Webb accessed her psychological profiles. For 8 years, she had been forced to live with the knowledge that the people who murdered her research team were developing weapons based on her innovations. Every day she cleaned laboratories and listened to conversations about defense research. She was preparing for the moment when those weapons would be used against American targets. "Look at this," Webb said, pointing to a section that detailed her daily activities. She wasn't just maintaining cover as a janitor. She was conducting covert analysis of everyone who worked here. Security assessments, threat evaluations, psychological profiles of potential foreign agents. Castillo felt his face flush with embarrassment as he realized that every security briefing he had conducted, every threat assessment he had filed, had been observed and evaluated by someone infinitely more qualified than himself. She knew more about facility security than I did. All these years, I thought I was protecting this place. She was protecting all of us, Dr. Hendricks said, her voice filled with newfound respect tinged with guilt. Every conversation I had about classified projects, every time I treated her like she was invisible. She was analyzing everything for potential security threats. The psychological evaluations revealed the full scope of Delilah's sacrifice. Living as a janitor hadn't just been professional cover, it had been a form of penance, a way of serving others while hiding from the fame and recognition that her innovations had earned. She had chosen invisibility over the medals and awards that awaited her, service over the lucrative private sector opportunities that would have made her wealthy beyond imagination. She gave up everything, Matthews realized. A brilliant career, financial security, professional recognition, even her own identity. All to protect people who didn't even know she existed. Webb found records of her original salary at Lawrence, Livermore, $340,000 annually, plus research bonuses that often exceeded her base pay. As a janitor at Meridian, she earned $28,000 per year and lived in a modest apartment that cost more than half her income. The $50 million secret, Dr. Hendricks whispered, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had witnessed. It wasn't just her knowledge. It was her willingness to give up a $50 million career to protect people who treated her like she didn't matter. The external speakers crackled with updates from the aerial engagement. Falcon Leader to NORAD Command. Enemy aircraft Echo 7 and Echo 11 have been neutralized. Remaining hostile aircraft are retreating but appear to be experiencing coordination failures. Confirmed, Falcon Leader. Shadowvo's tactical assessment was accurate. Enemy formation is collapsing without their command aircraft. But in the command center, nobody was celebrating the victory. They were grappling with the realization that they had spent 8 years working alongside one of the most brilliant scientists in American history, someone who had sacrificed everything to keep them safe, and they had never bothered to learn her name. She knew this day would come, Webb said, closing the classified files that had revealed the truth about their invisible guardian. Every morning for 8 years, she came to work knowing that eventually the people who killed her friends would try to steal the same technology from us. And she was ready. Dr. Hendricks looked at Delilah with eyes that saw her clearly for the first time. The quiet woman who had cleaned her office twice a week wasn't a janitor who had stumbled into heroism. She was a hero who had chosen janitorial work as the ultimate form of service, protecting others while asking for nothing in return except the chance to prevent another Blackwater Canyon. The revelation was complete, but the questions it raised would haunt everyone in that room for the rest of their lives. How many other invisible heroes walked among them? How many brilliant minds had chosen service over recognition? And how many times had they failed to see the extraordinary people who kept them safe simply because those people preferred to remain hidden? Outside, the enemy aircraft disappeared beyond the horizon. Their mission failed and their technology compromised. Inside the command center, 23 of America's most accomplished defense researchers finally understood that they had been learning from the greatest teacher of all, someone who had shown them what true heroism looked like by living it quietly, every single day for 8 years. With the enemy's command aircraft neutralized, the remaining 10 hostile aircraft began exhibiting erratic flight patterns that revealed the sophistication of Delilah's trap. She had allowed them to penetrate American airspace using stolen technology, but every system they deployed had been secretly monitored and analyzed through quantum sensors that had been recording their capabilities. For the past 2 hours, NORAD command. This is Shadowvo. Delilah spoke into the communication array while simultaneously coordinating defensive systems across multiple screens. Enemy aircraft are switching to secondary coordination protocols. Recommend immediate deployment of Wraith Squadron from Peterson Air Force Base using Echo-level countermeasures. Shadowvo, this is General Morrison. Wraith Squadron is classified above top secret. How do you have knowledge of their existence? Delilah's fingers moved across holographic interfaces that materialized from the quantum communication console, accessing military assets that existed in the deepest levels of Black Project classification. Because I designed their stealth capabilities 3 years ago as part of Project Shadowvo's contingency planning. Wraith Squadron carries technology specifically calibrated to defeat the quantum phase. Systems these aircraft are using. The main tactical display showed a co-show, 3-dimensional battlefield that extended from ground level to the edge of space. Enemy aircraft were attempting to retreat while maintaining their formation, but Delilah's quantum sensors had mapped their communication frequencies, power signatures, and even the molecular composition of their stealth coatings. Dr. Thorne, Lieutenant Colonel Matthews said, using her real name for the first time. The remaining enemy aircraft are faster than our F-22s. They're going to escape. No, they're not. Delilah activated systems that had been dormant beneath Meridian Defense Industries for 8 years. Initiating ground-based quantum disruption field. All enemy aircraft will experience complete avionics failure in approximately 90 seconds. The floor beneath the command center began vibrating as massive machinery activated in sub-basements that didn't appear on any building schematics. Dr. Webb watched his instruments register power consumption levels that should have been impossible for a civilian facility. How much hardware is hidden in this building? He asked in amazement. Meridian Defense Industries is built on top of a military installation that was classified so deeply it doesn't exist in any government records, Delilah explained while monitoring the quantum disruption field's deployment. The civilian research facility was constructed as camouflage for the most advanced defensive weapons system ever developed. Security. Chief Castillo felt the building shake as systems he had never imagined came online around them. You're telling me I've been providing security for a secret military base disguised as a defense contractor? The defensive systems require a minimum of 3 years to fully calibrate for specific threats, Delilah continued, her attention divided between multiple tactical scenarios. Project Shadowvo predicted that stolen quantum technology would eventually be used against American targets, so preparation began immediately after the Blackwater Canyon incident. On the external displays, the first enemy aircraft began losing altitude as its quantum phase stealth system experienced cascading failures. The pilot ejected, his parachute drifting toward a reception committee of military personnel who had been positioned hours earlier based on Delilah's tactical projections. Wraith, leader to NORAD command. A new voice crackled through the secured channel. We have visual on remaining hostile aircraft. They're beautiful birds, but they're falling out of the sky like rocks. Copy, Wraith Leader. Shadowvo predicted their power systems would fail once quantum disruption reached critical threshold. Maintain pursuit vector and document all technology for recovery. Operations. Dr. Hendricks watched as streams of data flowed across screens that were analyzing the enemy aircraft in real time, documenting every system, every component, every innovation that could be reverse engineered for American military purposes. You're not just defending against their attack. You're stealing their technology. The same technology they stole from us 8 years ago, Delilah confirmed. Every system on those aircraft incorporates research that was taken from Lawrence, Livermore after the Blackwater Canyon sabotage. Today's mission serves dual purposes: neutralize the threat and recover American intellectual property. The quantum disruption field was having effects that extended far beyond the enemy aircraft. Civilian electronics within a 50-mile radius were experiencing temporary malfunctions, but military systems throughout the region were operating with enhanced efficiency as the quantum field boosted their processing capabilities. Shadowvo, this is General Morrison. We're detecting massive power signatures from your location. What's your operational status? All systems are functioning within design parameters, General. Quantum disruption field is at 87% effectiveness. Enemy aircraft will be completely neutralized within 3 minutes. Dr. Webb studied readings that suggested the underground facility was generating more electrical power than a small city. Where is all this energy coming from? The quantum systems alone should require a nuclear reactor to operate at this level. Delilah activated a holographic display that showed the true structure of the installation beneath their feet. Multiple levels extended hundreds of feet underground, housing fusion reactors, quantum computers, and weapon systems that represented decades of classified research. Facility includes 3 compact fusion reactors that have been operational since 2019, she explained. Clean energy with no radioactive signature that could be detected by satellite surveillance. Each reactor can operate independently for up to 50 years without maintenance. 50 years, Castillo repeated in disbelief. You've been planning for threats that might not emerge for half a century? The technology stolen from Lawrence Livermore represented research that was 30 to 40 years ahead of conventional military systems, Delilah said. Project Shadowvo was designed to protect American interests across multiple decades while hostile forces developed applications for stolen quantum technology. The last enemy aircraft fell from the sky as its pilot successfully ejected, landing in a field where recovery teams were already waiting. The aerial battle was over, but the technology demonstration was just beginning. Delilah's systems had not only defeated an advanced enemy attack, they had captured intact examples of every hostile technology for detailed analysis. NORAD command, this is Wraith Leader. All enemy aircraft have been recovered with minimal damage. Pilots are in custody and technology packages are secure for transport. Outstanding work, Wraith Leader. Shadowvo, prepare for classified debrief with Department of Defense technical analysis teams. They'll want complete documentation of enemy capabilities, but Delilah was already coordinating the next phase of Project Shadowvo's mission. Recovery teams equipped with quantum-shielded transport vehicles were moving toward crash sites. Analysis laboratories that had been dormant for 8 years were activating throughout the underground facility. Most importantly, communication links were being established with research teams at other installations who would help reverse engineer the captured technology. Dr. Thorne, Dr. Hendricks said. What happens now? Do you return to cleaning our offices? Delilah looked at the woman who had supervised her janitorial duties while remaining completely unaware of the protection she was receiving. Project Shadowvo's primary mission has been completed. The stolen quantum technology has been recovered and neutralized. But American defense capabilities are still decades behind the most advanced threats we're likely to face. Meaning? Meaning that invisible protection will continue, but in different forms. This facility will resume normal research operations, but with enhanced security measures that most personnel will never notice. The underground installations will continue developing countermeasures for future threats that current intelligence can only imagine. The command centers. Tactical displays were showing worldwide implications of the day's events. Similar attacks on defense facilities in Utah, Nevada, and Virginia had also been defeated by systems that those facilities' personnel had never known existed. Project Shadowvo had been operational at multiple locations, creating a network of invisible protection that spanned the entire American defense industry. How many facilities have hidden installations like this one? Lieutenant Colonel Matthews asked. Every major defense contractor and research laboratory in the United States has some level of Shadowvo protection, Delilah replied. Most of them don't know it exists, just as you didn't know. The program was designed to operate without awareness or cooperation from the people being protected. The morning's crisis had been resolved through technology and planning that exceeded everyone's understanding of current military capabilities. But the deeper revelation was that America's defense infrastructure had been quietly evolving for years, developing countermeasures for threats that wouldn't become apparent until those threats were actually deployed against American targets. Delilah had spent 8 years preparing for exactly this scenario, using her position as an invisible janitor to monitor, analyze, and prepare defensive responses to technology that had killed her friends and colleagues. Today's victory wasn't just tactical success. It was personal vindication for someone who had sacrificed everything to ensure that the Blackwater Canyon disaster would never happen again. The enemy aircraft lay in scattered pieces across Colorado farmland, their advanced systems disabled and their secrets exposed. The people who had stolen American quantum technology 8 years earlier had finally been defeated by the same technology they thought they understood, deployed by the same scientist whose friends they had killed. Justice had been served, invisibly and completely, by someone who preferred to remain unnoticed while changing the course of military history. In the hours following the complete neutralization of the enemy aircraft, word of Shadowvo's success spread through classified military networks with the speed and impact of a seismic event. Defense installations across 3 continents began receiving priority communications about a custodial worker who had single-handedly defeated the most sophisticated aerial attack in modern military history. But the most profound transformation was occurring within the walls of Meridian Defense Industries itself. Dr. Patricia Hendricks stood in her office, staring at the same desk that Delilah had cleaned every Tuesday and Friday for 8 years. The mahogany surface looked exactly the same, but everything else had changed irrevocably. The woman she had treated as invisible furniture had been protecting her from threats she couldn't have imagined, using technology that redefined the boundaries of military science. She dusted this desk while listening to me discuss classified projects, Hendricks said to Lieutenant Colonel Matthews, who had come to help process the psychological aftermath of their revelations. Every conversation I had about sensitive research, every phone call with Pentagon officials, every meeting with foreign contractors. She was analyzing it all for security threats. Matthews nodded, her expression reflecting the same mixture of awe and embarrassment that was affecting everyone who had worked with Delilah. According to the files I'd been reading, she identified and neutralized 6 potential security breaches just in the past 2 years. Industrial espionage attempts that would have compromised billions of dollars in defense research, and we never knew, Hendricks said quietly. We never even thanked her for keeping our coffee cups clean, let alone for saving our lives repeatedly. Throughout the facility, similar conversations were taking place as personnel grappled with the reality that their most accomplished colleague had been the one they had noticed least. In the engineering department, Dr. Marcus Webb was reviewing 8 years of security logs that showed how Delilah had subtly guided conversations away from sensitive topics whenever potentially compromised individuals were present. "Look at this," Webb said to his research team, pointing to entries that documented Delilah's movements through their workspace. Every time we had visitors from foreign universities or international contractors, she would find reasons to clean areas where sensitive prototypes were displayed. She was creating distractions to prevent unauthorized observation of our work. Junior engineer Sarah Kim, who had been with Meridian for 3 years, shook her head in amazement. "I remember her bumping into that delegation from Beijing last month, spilling cleaning supplies right in front of the quantum processor display. I thought she was just clumsy. She was protecting a $40 billion research program," Webb replied. The Beijing delegation included 2 individuals who were later identified by intelligence services as military technology specialists. Her accident prevented them from photographing systems that could have compromised national security. The revelations extended far beyond individual interactions. Security Chief Raymond Castillo discovered that many of his most successful threat assessments had been based on information that Delilah had carefully positioned for him to find. Equipment malfunctions that had exposed hidden surveillance devices, scheduling conflicts that had prevented unauthorized access to sensitive areas, even personnel recommendations that had kept potential security risks away from critical projects. "She's been managing facility security for 8 years," Castillo admitted to his staff during an emergency briefing. "Every protocol I thought I had developed, every successful investigation I believed I had conducted. She was orchestrating everything from behind the scenes." His deputy, Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, raised her hand hesitantly. "Sir, does this mean our security clearances are inadequate? If a janitor had access to information we couldn't see ... She wasn't a janitor," Castillo replied, his voice heavy with newfound respect. "She was the most qualified security professional any of us will ever work with, and she chose to protect us while letting us believe we were protecting ourselves." The psychological impact on facility personnel was profound and varied. Some employees felt grateful for protection they had never known they needed. Others struggled with embarrassment at how thoroughly they had underestimated someone who had worked alongside them for years. A few experienced genuine shame at remembering specific instances when they had treated Delilah dismissively or rudely. Dr. Janet Morrison from the Materials Science Department found herself replaying every interaction she had ever had with the woman she now knew as Dr. Delilah Thorne. "I complained to her supervisor last year because she was too slow cleaning the laboratory windows," Morrison confessed to her colleagues. "I actually filed a formal complaint about the work performance of someone who has more advanced degrees than our entire department combined." The cafeteria staff, who had served Delilah lunch every day for 8 years, were discovering their own connections to her hidden mission. Head cook Francis Romano had always wondered why the quiet maintenance woman ate the same simple meals and sat alone at the corner table near the emergency exits. She was positioning herself to monitor everyone who entered the facility, Romano realized. From that table, she could observe every visitor, every contractor, every delivery person who came through our building. "I thought she was antisocial, but she was working." The transformation in how people viewed Delilah was matched by changes in how they understood their own facility. Maintenance staff were discovering that many of the systems they had been servicing contained components they had never recognized. Electrical panels that seemed routine actually controlled quantum-encrypted communication networks. Ventilation systems that appeared standard included atmospheric sensors capable of detecting chemical or biological weapons. This entire building is essentially a military installation disguised as a civilian workplace, facilities manager Robert Chun explained to his team. "Every system we maintain, every repair we make, every upgrade we install, It's all part of a defensive network that most of us never knew existed. The implications extended to their families and personal lives as well. Employees began realizing that their safety at work had been guaranteed by someone who had sacrificed her own recognition and financial security to protect them. Spouses and children who had never heard of Delilah Thorne learned that their family members returned home safely each day because of her invisible vigilance. But perhaps the most significant aftermath was occurring in military and intelligence communities, where news of Shadowvo's success was reshaping assumptions about defensive capabilities and covert operations. General Patricia Morrison convened emergency sessions with the Joint Chiefs of Staff to discuss implications that extended far beyond a single facility in Colorado. Project Shadowvo represents a new paradigm for protecting critical infrastructure, General Morrison explained to the assembled military leadership. Instead of obvious military presence that announces the importance of a facility, we embed advanced defensive capabilities within civilian operations that appear completely normal. The success was so complete and so unprecedented that it was attracting attention from the highest levels of government. Within 6 hours of the attack's defeat, Delilah received communication requests from the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the President's National Security Advisor. But she declined all formal recognition ceremonies, all media interviews, and all opportunities to return to official government service. Her response to every offer was the same. Project Shadowvo's mission required continued invisibility, and personal recognition would compromise operational security for ongoing protective missions at other facilities. Staff at Meridian Defense Industries were left to process the reality that their most extraordinary colleague preferred to remain unnoticed, that their greatest protector chose service over recognition, and that true heroism often wore the uniform of ordinary work performed with extraordinary dedication. Dr. Hendricks drafted a letter of recommendation that she knew would never be submitted, describing Delilah as the most accomplished professional she had ever worked with and the most effective security specialist in American defense history. She sealed it in an envelope marked "Personal Recognition for Dr. Delilah Catherine Thorne" and placed it in her desk drawer, knowing it would remain there as long as Delilah continued her invisible mission. The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the facility's reinforced windows, and somewhere in those shadows, the most decorated scientist in American military history was quietly returning to work, her cleaning cart squeaking slightly on its left front wheel as she moved through hallways filled with people who finally understood, who had been watching over them all along. 6 months after the day enemy aircraft learned the hard way that America's defense capabilities extended far beyond what appeared on any public record, Delilah Thorne returned to her routine at Meridian Defense Industries with the same quiet efficiency that had characterized her work for 8 years. Her employee badge still read "Maintenance Services." Her uniform still bore the same small stains that never quite washed out, and her cleaning cart still squeaked on its left front wheel. But everything else had changed in ways both subtle and profound. The morning arrival ritual remained identical. At 4:30 a.m. sharp, her 15-year-old Honda Civic pulled into Space 247, far from the building entrance where executives claimed premium parking spots. But now, security guards standing near the employee entrance straightened to respectful attention when they saw her approaching. Not obvious salutes or dramatic gestures that might compromise her cover, but the kind of quiet acknowledgement that passed between professionals who understood the true nature of service. "Morning, ma'am," Officer David Park said with a slight nod, using the respectful tone reserved for senior personnel. 6 months earlier, he had barely noticed her existence. Now he knew that the woman scanning her employee badge was responsible for his continued ability to return home safely to his wife and 2 children each evening. Delilah's response was the same gentle smile she had always offered, But Park could see something different in her eyes now. The careful blankness of someone hiding extraordinary capabilities had been replaced by the quiet confidence of someone whose true value had finally been recognized, even if that recognition had to remain largely invisible. Executive offices on the 10th floor told the story of transformation through details that most visitors would never notice. CEO Patricia Rothschild's mahogany desk was still dusted with the same meticulous care, but now Rothschild made sure to be present during Delilah's cleaning times. Not to supervise, but to offer quiet thanks for protection that extended far beyond maintaining clean work surfaces. The quarterly security briefing went well. Rothschild mentioned during one such encounter, speaking as one professional to another rather than as an executive to maintenance staff. The Pentagon is very pleased with our enhanced defensive capabilities. Delilah's response was characteristically modest. I'm glad the facility's security measures continue to meet expectations, but both women understood they were discussing systems that had redefined the possibilities of civilian infrastructure protection, innovations that were being studied and replicated at critical installations worldwide. Engineering floors had developed their own new normal, with personnel who had once ignored Delilah now seeking opportunities for brief conversations that never quite acknowledged what they all knew. Dr. Marcus Webb made sure his team's coffee maker was always properly maintained, creating natural opportunities for interactions with the woman whose intellectual contributions exceeded those of his entire department. We're making good progress on the new quantum processing array, Webb would mention while she wiped down laboratory surfaces, sharing information that 6 months earlier would have been far above her supposed security clearance. Now he understood that her knowledge of quantum systems exceeded his own, and that discussing technical challenges with her provided insights that improved their research outcomes. Junior engineer Sarah Kim had transformed her own approach to professional interactions after learning about Delilah's background. I started paying attention to the support staff throughout the building, Kim explained to colleagues during a training session on workplace respect. Custodial workers, cafeteria employees, security guards. You never know who might have expertise or insights that could benefit your work. More importantly, everyone deserves professional courtesy regardless of their job title. The underground research laboratories presented the most complex navigation of the new normal. Dr. Patricia Hendricks still supervised Delilah's cleaning duties in Laboratory 14, but their interactions had evolved into something approaching collaboration. Sensitive prototypes were no longer covered when Delilah was present, because everyone understood that she possessed clearance levels that exceeded most department heads. The new defensive grid is operating at 93% efficiency, Hendricks would report during Delilah's visits, providing status updates on systems that Delilah had designed. Should we implement the recommended modifications to the quantum field generators? The modifications will improve efficiency to 97%. Delilah would respond while emptying wastebaskets that might contain fragments of research worth billions of dollars. But implementation should wait until after the scheduled inspection by Defense Intelligence Agency representatives next month. These conversations took place in whispers and coded language that maintained operational security while acknowledging the reality that the facility's most classified research was being guided by someone whose official job description involved mopping floors and cleaning windows. The broader impact of Delilah's story had rippled through defense industry culture in ways that surprised even military leadership. Personnel at research facilities across the country began paying closer attention to support staff who had previously been invisible parts of the workplace infrastructure. Custodial workers found themselves being treated with increased respect, not because anyone suspected they were covert military specialists, but because Delilah's example had demonstrated the dignity and potential significance of every job performed with dedication. We received 17 applications for maintenance Positions this month, Facilities Manager Robert Chun reported during a staff meeting, including inquiries from individuals with advanced engineering degrees who want to work in support roles. It seems that Dr. Thorne's story has inspired people to consider service-oriented careers. The applications came from recently discharged military veterans, from overqualified scientists seeking meaningful work, and from young professionals who had been inspired by stories of someone who chose invisible service over visible recognition. Most would never know whether their colleagues included individuals with extraordinary hidden capabilities, but they understood that every job performed with excellence contributed to something larger than personal advancement. The psychological impact on Meridian's existing staff continued, evolving as they adapted to working alongside someone whose true capabilities they now understood. Coffee conversations included more thoughtful discussions about the nature of service, the value of different types of work, and the importance of treating all colleagues with respect and appreciation. I used to think success meant getting promoted to positions where other people served. Admitted Dr. Janet Morrison from the Materials Science Department. Now I understand that the highest form of success might be choosing to serve others while asking for nothing in return except the opportunity to continue serving. Cafeteria remained Delilah's preferred location for lunch, still at the corner table near the emergency exits where she could observe everyone who entered the facility. But now her solitary meals were occasionally interrupted by colleagues who asked permission to join her, not to probe for classified information or to satisfy curiosity about her background, but to express gratitude for her protection and to learn from someone whose life choices had demonstrated principles they wanted to incorporate into their own careers. These conversations were always brief and respectful of her privacy, but they created connections that enriched the workplace culture for everyone involved. Francis Romano, the head cook, began preparing special meals that he knew were Delilah's favorites. Small gestures of appreciation that never called attention to themselves, but conveyed profound respect for someone who had chosen to remain invisible while keeping everyone safe. The most significant change was perhaps the least visible one. Throughout Meridian Defense Industries and at similar facilities across the country, personnel began approaching their daily work with enhanced awareness of its broader significance. Engineers understood that their research contributed to national security in ways that extended beyond technical specifications. Administrative staff recognized that their careful handling of information helped protect innovations that could determine the outcome of future conflicts. Even genuine custodial workers took pride in maintaining spaces where critical defense research was conducted. This cultural transformation was exactly what Delilah had hoped to achieve through her 8-year demonstration of service-oriented leadership. She had shown that true strength often preferred invisibility, that real security came from people who chose duty over recognition, and that the most important work was frequently performed by those who never expected thanks or acknowledgement. As evening approached and the day shift maintenance crew arrived to handle afternoon cleaning duties, Delilah returned her supplies to the storage closet and punched out on the time clock, exactly as she had done thousands of times before. Her Honda Civic started on the second try, as always, and she drove toward her modest apartment in Millbrook with the satisfaction of someone whose life's work was making a difference in ways that would never be measured in salary increases or performance evaluations. But throughout the defense industry, in military installations around the world, and in the daily conversations of people who had learned to see extraordinary potential in ordinary service, Dr. Delilah Thorne's influence continued expanding. Her example reminded everyone who heard her story that heroes walked among them every day, that service was more valuable than recognition, and that the people who kept them safe were often the ones they noticed least. In a world where social media celebrated visible achievement and public recognition, Delilah had chosen a different path. She had demonstrated that the highest form of success was making other people's lives better while asking for nothing except the opportunity to continue serving. Her story proved that real heroes preferred cleaning supplies to medal ceremonies, that genuine strength chose invisibility over fame, and that the most important work was often performed by those who never expected anyone to notice. If you believe that every quiet person might be carrying extraordinary capabilities, every service worker might be protecting you in ways you never realize, and every individual who chooses duty over recognition deserves your respect and gratitude, then you understand the true message of Delilah Thorne's remarkable life. Sometimes the people who matter most are the ones we see the least, and the greatest heroes are those who prefer to remain invisible while changing the world, one small act of service at a time. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.